You wake up, and everything feels normal. No sirens, no breaking glass, no reason to fall apart today. Yet something inside you is heavy. The kind of weight that doesn't leave a bruise. The kind that sits behind your heartbeat and watches you breathe. You tell yourself you're fine. You pour the coffee, answer the messages, smile at the mirror. But the mirror knows you're lying. Pain this quiet doesn't scream. It settles, like dust on the shelves you stopped cleaning, like a song stuck on a note no one can hear but you. Day after day, you get better at carrying it, joking it away, working it away, pretending it away. But tonight, stop for a moment. Listen to that small, uneven rhythm inside your chest. That is everything you never said. Everything you buried so deep you forgot where you left it. And before this night is over, we will open those locked rooms. Gently, quietly, one story at a time. Because some wounds don't need a bandage. They need a voice. Welcome in. He used to speak in storms. Now he says nothing. People used to listen when he laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was loud enough to make them believe he was okay. His apartment sits above a small cafe that closes too early and opens too late. The kind of place where silence gets louder at 2 a.m. and the walls creak like they're trying to remember who lived here before him. There's a couch he never uses and a mirror he avoids. Not because of vanity, but because every time he looks into it, he wonders if the man staring back is still trying or just pretending to exist. He works remotely, keeps his meetings short, keeps his camera off. Nobody questions it. Because men like him, the quiet ones who always deliver, are rarely asked how they're doing. And if someone did ask, he has a perfect response. I'm good, just tired. Always tired. But the truth is, he hasn't really slept in months. Sleep, for him, is just a change of scenery. From external noise to internal chaos. He drinks black coffee in the morning and whiskey that tastes like ash at night. One to stay awake, the other to forget why he's still awake. Every drawer is organized. Every message is answered. Every smile practiced. He's not falling apart. Not obviously. He's just slowly evaporating. It started with small things. Forgetting to eat. Forgetting to text back. Forgetting what day it was. Then came the missed calls. The unopened emails. The unread birthday messages he promised himself he'd reply to later. But later never came. Because time, for him, became slippery. Like trying to hold water in a cracked glass. He didn't cry. Men like him don't. Instead, he stared. At walls, ceilings, the glow of his laptop. And sometimes into nothing. His friends noticed. At first. The "you okay, man?" text slowly turned into memes. Then silence. He started saying, "I'm just busy lately." which was true, busy pretending. Even his mother, the one person who used to hear the shift in his tone, stopped asking too deeply, because every time she did, he'd just redirect the topic. Have you eaten today, Ma? Still going to church every Sunday? Deflection became his fluency. But beneath all that silence was noise. Crippling, unrelenting noise. His mind didn't race, it screamed. What's wrong with you? You have no right to feel this way. Other people have it worse. You're just being dramatic. Voices that sounded like his own, but felt like strangers living rent-free inside his head. So he stopped talking altogether. Not just to people, to himself. Because every word he said felt like a lie. He didn't break all at once. It started with small, invisible cracks. The kind you don't notice, until everything's already falling apart. It was a Tuesday. Ordinary, unremarkable, but something in him finally gave in. A joke at the office that stung a little too deep. A message that didn't come. The silence of a room he used to feel safe in. He smiled, as always. But the weight behind it? It was heavier than ever. At lunch, he stared at his coffee. Hands steady, but eyes screaming. He heard their voices, the same people who called him strong. But all he wanted to do was ask, what if I'm tired of being strong? What if I don't want to carry this anymore? But of course, he said nothing, because that's what he's good at. Smiling, nodding, swallowing every damn thing that might make others uncomfortable. By evening, he was home, lights off, phone face down. He sat on the floor, back against the wall. Not out of drama, but exhaustion. He couldn't remember the last time someone looked at him and saw more than what he pretended to be. And that was the real grief. Not being broken, but being invisible in his breaking. He didn't cry. Not that night. Not the next. Tears require permission, and he never gave himself any. People passed him every day. Colleagues, neighbors, friends. None of them knew. That silence had become his loudest scream. He still showed up. Still helped others. Still said, I'm fine. Not because he was, but because the truth would have made things too complicated. Maybe someday, someone would notice the way his smile doesn't quite reach his eyes anymore. Maybe someone would ask twice, instead of nodding at his first lie. But for now, he walks on, not healed, not shattered, just existing, between what hurts and what must be hidden. And no one ever knew how much strength it took to simply not disappear. They say silence is strength, but what they don't tell you is how heavy that strength becomes. When no one notices you're carrying it, he wore silence like armor. But some battles aren't meant to be fought alone. And while he faded into the background, hoping to be seen, there was someone else in a different corner of this broken world, screaming without sound, Her pain didn't come quietly. It came wrapped in expectations, in painted smiles, and applause she never asked for. Not every war is waged in silence. Some are disguised as perfection. They clapped before she even spoke, because that's what they always did. Not for her words, but for the version of her they wanted to believe in. She was the strong girl, the one who always smiled, always showed up, always delivered. They never asked how she felt. They asked when the next performance would be. She wasn't raised. She was trained, mannered, polished, perfect. From her earliest memories, she was applauded for staying quiet when it hurt, for smiling through the disappointment, for turning heartbreak into pretty words that made others feel better. She didn't cry, she inspired. She didn't collapse, she rose. And when she did break, they called it ungrateful. So, she stopped trying to be heard and focused on being seen, but not as herself, as a masterpiece, not a girl, a gallery. Everyday life became a stage. She smiled at funerals. She gave advice she never followed. She celebrated the success of others, while privately mourning her own failures. Because to them, she was success. She was hope. She was the embodiment of resilience. But resilience doesn't mean you're not tired. And strength isn't the absence of pain. It's just the art of not bleeding where they can see. She laughed with her friends and dissociated the second she was alone. She dated people who only loved the mask, never realizing there was someone gasping underneath. She journaled like she was writing to God, but not for salvation, for escape. She became addicted to being okay. Because the moment she wasn't, the applause would stop, and the silence after applause was the loudest thing she ever heard. So she pushed harder, smiled wider, spoke softer, until she disappeared into the image they wanted. And she didn't even notice, until she couldn't remember what her own voice sounded like. The breakdown wasn't a scream. It was a whisper, the missed messages, the fake "I'm fine" texts, the "sorry, I've been busy" lies, the voice notes she never opened. She didn't burn bridges, she faded from them. No one saw her unravel, because she was too good at performing even while drowning. And when she finally cracked, they didn't ask why. They asked, "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" But how could she? They only loved the version of her that never needed help. The pain didn't show up as chaos. It showed up in quiet withdrawals, half-hearted laughs, and maybe next time that slowly turned into maybe never again. She didn't want to die. She just didn't want to perform anymore. But stepping off the stage meant losing everything. So she kept going, until one day, the mask slipped, and no one recognized her. Not even herself. You don't notice when a star burns out immediately. It takes time for the light to stop reaching you. That's what happened with her. She's still around, posting, smiling, working. But what made her real, what made her alive, is gone. She still talks, but nothing she says feels like her. She still shows up, but it's not her that's arriving. Maybe one day, she'll walk away from the stage, not as a performance, but as a person. Maybe one day, someone will clap for her after she's told the truth. But for now, the show goes on, and behind the curtain, she quietly disappears. They were different people, different lives, different wounds, different masks. But underneath all that pretending, they were built from the same silent ache, a hunger to be understood, not just admired. She vanished behind applause. He vanished behind silence. One ran from herself through performance. The other buried himself in isolation, mistaking absence for peace. They both disappeared, just in opposite directions. And now, we meet him, a boy who didn't want to impress anyone. He just wanted the world to shut up. Not because he hated people, but because every sound felt like a lie. Every conversation felt like noise. Every "how are you" felt like a trap. So he ran, but silence didn't save him either. He never liked loud places. Not because of volume, but because of meaninglessness. Crowds always talked, and talked, and talked, but no one really listened. No one really said anything. To him, noise wasn't just sound. It was expectation. Expectation to smile, to respond, to laugh at jokes that weren't funny, to play a character he didn't recognize. So at some point, he just stopped participating. He would sit at dinner tables and say nothing. He would walk among friends and feel like a ghost. He would wake up and already be exhausted by the thought of acting normal. They called him quiet, but he wasn't. He was overflowing, just in ways nobody could hear. He didn't want attention. He wanted peace. He thought maybe silence was the answer. So he moved, left the city, left the noise, left the fake conversations. He found a small place on the edge of nowhere. Just sky, wind, and himself. No more expectations. No more invitations. No more pretending. And at first, it felt like freedom. The kind of freedom that tastes like air after a storm. Clean. Still. He woke up with no alarm. Sat with no purpose. breathed with no timeline. There were no footsteps around him, no doors opening, no voices asking what's wrong. It was finally quiet, but then came the echo. An echo not from outside, but from within. Silence began to whisper, not peace, but all the things he buried. Old regrets, unfinished grief. That one moment when he needed someone to stay, and they didn't. That apology he never gave. That version of himself that never got to exist. And worse, he started to realize something terrifying. The world wasn't always the problem. Sometimes he was. He started talking to himself, not out loud, just mentally. At first it was reflection. Then it became interrogation. Why am I like this? Why do I push people away? Why do I hate being seen, but feel so invisible? There were no mirrors in the cabin. But the silence became one. And it didn't flatter him. It showed his resentment, his control issues, his need to feel invisible but also important. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was a witness, a slow, brutal judge, a stillness that offered no comfort, only clarity. He realized he wasn't chasing silence. He was running from truth. He wasn't an introvert. He was ashamed of needing connection, but being too afraid to earn it. Ashamed of always observing, but never engaging. Ashamed of being lonely, but also elitist about it. As if his pain was more poetic than others. As if isolation made him deeper. It didn't. It just made him empty. One evening, the wind picked up, and he didn't close the windows. He just sat there, watching papers fly across the room. His journal, his drawings, his favorite quote on a wrinkled note. The quieter you become, the more you can hear. He laughed, then cried, not because the quote was wrong, but because it was incomplete. You can hear more in silence, but what you hear might destroy you. He stayed in that room for hours, not meditating, not grieving, just existing. And when morning came, he walked outside barefoot. The ground was wet. The air was thick, and he whispered something to the sky that only he could hear. No dramatic ending. No epiphany. No redemption arc. He simply existed. Not healed. Not broken. Just there. Alive. But quiet in a way that no longer ran from truth. Just quiet. Because finally, he could face it. So what do you do when silence isn't the solution? When solitude feels more like suffocation? When you realize you weren't really escaping the world, you were escaping yourself? There's no quote for that, no clean answer, no soothing mantra. Just breath and the brutal gift of stillness. Some people are haunted by voices, others by silence. Some crave to be understood, but hide behind laughter. Some scream without sound, hoping someone, anyone, might still hear them. And some just disappear quietly, not because they want to be forgotten, but because they never felt seen in the first place. 3 stories, 3 masks, 3 souls pretending to be fine. In a world that only claps for performances, not for pain. But what if we started listening differently? What if we stopped labeling people as too quiet or too dramatic or too much? Because sometimes a person's silence isn't peace, it's grief. And sometimes their smile isn't joy, it's survival. If any part of this touched you, if you saw even a fragment of yourself in them, then maybe you've been carrying too much, with too few words, for far too long. And if you're tired of pretending, tired of being the strong one, tired of healing in silence, you don't owe the world a perfect version of you. You just owe yourself a little softness, a little truth, a little forgiveness. Because behind every quiet person, there's a war they've survived that no one ever applauded. And if you're still here, listening, watching, breathing, then maybe this space was meant for you. This channel isn't about motivation. It's not about pretending things are okay. It's about pausing and feeling what you've buried. It's about those moments when you finally exhale and realize you've been holding it all in. So if you believe the world needs more truth, more reflection, more raw honesty, then help this little corner of the internet grow. Subscribe. Not just to a channel, but to a space that lets pain exist without shame. Your presence here means more than you know.